to Geared for Growth. I'm your host, Mike Mortlock from MCG Quantity Surveyors. Today I've got a really important interview, I think, where we're talking about the affordability problem with housing. Rental affordability has been in the media for quite some time. A lot of investors have left the market, which has left rental affordability a national concern. And today I'm talking to an absolute guru who's very passionate about trying to solve the affordable housing problem. I'm speaking to Symon Peters from 360 Collective. He is a successful property investor and developer himself. I talked to him about his construction background, what affordable housing actually means, the types of projects that he's bringing to the market and trying to get local councils and governments behind what he's trying to do, and how you might be able to be involved yourself as well. He's extremely energized in this space, and I think he's going to do some great good in the space, and hopefully we see a lot of people replicating what Symon's able to do and solve this affordable housing crisis and rental accommodation crisis. Here's Symon. Symon Peters, thanks for joining me on Geared for Growth.
My pleasure, Mike. Yeah, happy to be here, mate. Exciting time of the year as well, coming up to Christmas. So looking forward to the break.
Absolutely. I think we all are. It's been a hell of a year. Now, I've been really excited to get you on the show because we're talking about something, I suppose, a little bit different from the norm, and it plugs into some of the comments from the recent budgets speech where the Treasurer is talking about we've got this housing issue and we really need to look to the private sector to be able to solve it. So obviously they're not going to be getting back into the public housing business. So I'm really looking forward to chatting to you about that. But before we dive into that, can you give us a bit of an idea about your property and construction background, Symon?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to talk about today, so we'll try and keep it short. But in effect, I started out as a building labourer on a building site in New Zealand when I was about 18 years old. So sort of had a lot of experience just from the ground up. So really just tying steel, digging holes, and just making sure that I was learning everything along the way, and eventually got into the sort of supervision side of the building. We were doing a lot of commercial property, warehouses, factories, civil work. And then, I pretty much was just a labourer's hammer hand, and then ended up supervising sites and building retirement villages and all sorts of stuff. And then from there, I was always thinking about how can I, I always wanted to do more. I always wanted to grow, and got myself a little property and did a splitter, what you'd call a splitter in Australia. Cut the land off the back of a house and started my property development career.
Yep. And from there, obviously, you've had a tremendous amount of success with that. But what made you kind of transition to wanting to be able to give back to society with your area of expertise in the construction and development and financing space? Well,
look, I'm always one that loves innovation. I'm always thinking about how we can solve problems. Being a property developer, you're always solving problems. The whole life is filled with, things that spring up that you didn't expect. Expect the unexpected is what I learned. So solving the unexpected is the key to success, or one of the keys to success and development. And a sad story, my wife passed away with breast cancer a year and a half ago. And during the few years while we were going through that process, I really got to a place where I realized there was a lot more to life than just doing development, making money and all the rest of it, which is all fantastic, nothing against any of that. And we have to do that to be successful and to grow. So I was really thinking what I really wanted to do with life. I sort of like, who am I? What do I really want to do? What am I good at? And what can I offer the world? The Japanese Ikigai circles I did, which was a process over about 6 months. And I came to the point of realizing, I wanted to do more. And I realized that I could offer more in the space that I'm already, expertised in. And I got to realizing and knowing and seeing around people that didn't have homes, didn't have housing, especially women over 50 that were divorced, or, they'd left their husbands, or their families had ended, their children had grown up. And I was like, well, there's a really big cohort here that haven't been looked after. They're living in caravan parks and that sort of thing. It's unsafe. What can I do about that? What can I bring to the table based on my experience? And so that's how I really got into the space, and now I'm just super passionate about it. It's pretty much everything I want to do for the rest of my life. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, wow. Well, that's a big motivator. And you touched on, the demographic of certainly women, 50 plus. This is, one of the things that when we talk about homelessness, we have kind of a bit of a stereotype that these are maybe people that have made the wrong choices. Maybe they're subject to, addictions and those sorts of things. But the reality is that many of these people are not like that. They just might have not necessarily had the super balance that their partner has had and become separated, and the cost of living pressures have been absolutely crazy. And I think the rental crisis has got quite a lot longer to run. That led you to sort of form the 360 Collective. So can you talk us through a little bit about how that works and how you're looking to solve that problem?
Sure. It's a bit unusual. So when I did that Ikigai process, I got to the point where you end up with a sort of focus of circle in the middle, and that's where you should spend 98% of your time. I got there and I was like, okay, how does this look? So I asked myself the question, how does this look? And I didn't have the answer. But the answer came to me, and I thought, well, I don't really believe that corporations are going to be a long-term animal that survives, the world in 100 years, I think... Yep. The basis of 360 is about the potential of a human being. How do you extract, or how do you help or support a person to be their absolute best and live their best life? And quite honestly, 360 is really founded on that. And if you ask anybody in our organisation or people join it, they're quite amazed by how we think about things and how we look after our people and what we are there to do, which is to serve our community. So it's really founded on bringing the best out of you. And if you are doing something that's not really what you're passionate about, I encourage everyone to change and to find that. So 360 isn't it's a company, but it's not structured like that. We have like partners, associates, junior partners. And the goal is to build verticals within the business. Doesn't matter what you do in terms of the business, although we are focused on property, but it could cover anything. But if you've got the right mindset, right mentality, and you really want to make a difference, we're here to support you if you're part of 360 in your growth journey. It's a personal growth journey. It's a life growth journey. It's a business growth journey. It's entrepreneurial. It's a success. It's financial. It covers every aspect. And the team at 360 are there for each other. That's really what we are.
Yeah, awesome. And when it comes to solving that affordable rental accommodation problem, how are you guys tackling that head on? And something that I've seen you talk about a lot is this triple bottom line. Can you explain that for us as well?
Yeah, well, I love the triple bottom line because it embodies pretty much what we are doing, which is, social, economic, and environmental benefits. So everything we do in terms of development, construction, property work is we think about how can we do a better job with the environment? How can we improve environmentally in terms of how we handle our construction, our materials, what types of methodologies we use to build. And we think about the social difference that we're making. So we really are out there. That's our core, is how can we make a difference socially, which is obviously in this space affordable housing. And then we also have to make money because we're a private enterprise. We don't get any government funding or state funding or federal funding, and we're not asking for any. We don't want any. We want to be private. We want to say we can make a difference. We don't need to have handouts to do that. And so we put our minds to that innovation and go, well, how can we do a better job? And in saying that, our investors that join us have to make good profits, because if they don't, they'll put their money in another place that makes some good profits, and so they should. So our goal is to make our investors good returns for their investment. And when I say economically, people that rent our properties, also we're helping them economically because we're affordable.
Yeah. And what's the modern definition of affordable rental accommodation in this day and age? And how do you run what is essentially a business and make sure that you're still on target for delivering that affordable product? Because obviously there'd be shareholders that'd be thinking, well, there's a temptation to just up the rents by $100 because the market can absorb it. So how do you balance those two sort of very different things in concert?
That's a really good question. I think quite deeply about that, and I've also talked to the team about how do we sort of justify our role and our claim to be affordable, and that's important. If you look at it and you look at what other people are doing, and we have, that most of them are saying it's based on a percentage of income. We look at what an area is. Affordable in Sydney is different to affordable in the Gold Coast or in Brisbane or in a country town. So what we say is that affordable for us is to bring housing at the lowest point in the market in terms of its cost. So in other words, if your rentals are XYZ a week for 99% of the properties, we're at the 1% bottom. We're not going to try and base it on income. I think that's probably a flawed model. I think that at the end of the day, if people aren't able to find accommodation, there's no supply, and they aren't able to move into things because they can't afford it, our job is to provide that. And you're right, we're not looking to provide that sort of last resort housing. That's not us, although we do intend to build a charity around that eventually. And there's a lot to be thought about there. But our job is to bring affordability to those that can't find anything else that works for them.
Yep. And when we're talking about affordable housing, I mean, what does that look like kind of structurally? Are we talking, high density? Are we talking, houses on small lots? I mean, the typical idea about the most affordable things is this community style or boarding house style property. But most people that I know are investing in that sort of property because of the yields rather than the affordability, right? So what are we talking about exactly there?
Well, boarding house style properties is really, there's a modern boarding house, and yes, we are in that space. So we're providing a variety. So community is actually the number one point you just made. Then you've got to be able to build a community, and if you can't build that community, you end up doing it with a so-called sort of slum landlord type scenario, and we don't want to be that, obviously. We do think carefully about how can we provide variety of products. So some of the products quite small. It's 20 square meters. It's a studio. But it's fully furnished. You get your power, electricity, telco, high-speed internet, all of that sort of thing. And some of the product we're bringing into the market, it will be more like apartment-style living. So it needs to be a mix. And also, we're finding it difficult with some of the councils. So one of the councils in particular, we've struggled to get their head around what they've actually zoned land for and allow us to build affordable housing. So it's an education thing for people as well. We've got to help everybody understand what that really means and what our target demographic is. So it needs to be a mix. You can't just do one style of housing. We've got a project in Toowoomba that we're doing SDA. Is that affordable? Well, it's affordable for those tenants, or it's specifically designed for those types of tenants, That does have government support, not to us, but to the tenants.
When it comes to talking about government support, what made you think that the answer is more likely to come from the private sector, or at least you feel like you could make much more of a difference than perhaps joining a community housing provider or pitching the government for funding on a financing model?
That's come from my own experience. So back in New Zealand, we used to build government housing. We actually did projects for Housing New Zealand, which is the government model. So we bought land, we built houses, we did apartments, we did a whole range of products. And in the end, we got absolutely crushed by one of the big projects that we were putting together in Auckland City in 1997. So way back then, that's how old I am. And the government, there was an Asian currency crisis, and we had a $30 million project back then. And it was the largest project that Housing New Zealand had ever done in the centre of Auckland City. And they were moving people out of Parnell, which is the most expensive suburb in Auckland, down into the ex-railway yards. And we had a big project there. And we'd spent a year and $1 million on it to put it together. The CEO of Housing New Zealand was in our boardroom saying they're going to go ahead. However, it went into Parliament, and the government said we're saving $300 million and cancelling a whole lot of things. And they cancelled that project. And it absolutely crushed us back then. We'd invested a lot of money. We'd been led along believing it was going to happen. The government just turned around and changed it. So we really got a big lesson. And my lesson back then is, like, when you're dealing with institutions like that, in terms of governments and what have you, politics can play a big role in success or failure. And I'm not going to pick on any particular government because they're all the same. So I realised that, really to have something that's got longevity to it, and it's not driven by anything political, it needs to be driven by, to be quite frank, it needs to be driven by investors making money. And that's the private sector. So I thought, well, let's see if we can do something in that sector, in this affordable housing space, and actually not ask anybody for money other than make returns for investors.
Yeah, I mean, if that can work, and it's not about, I guess a bleeding heart style pitch, invest with us and get 2% return where you could be getting 6%, but you're actually doing something good. Imagine if you could still get that 6% return and do the good as well. right now you're talking about sophisticated investors or institutional investors, but do you see a point in time where your quintessential mum and dad investors could be involved in these projects? The Geared for Growth Property Investing podcast is presented by our business, MCG Quantity Surveyors. If you're an investor or a property professional looking to get the best tax depreciation deductions for yourself or your clients, please get in touch with us at mcgqs.com.au. It's our mission to help as many property investors as we can to maximise their claims and maximise their property education as well.
Well, I would love mum and dad investors to be involved. The ASIC restrictions around that, or the laws around that, are extremely tight, and for good reasons. Nobody wants to see mum and dad investors lose all their savings, which you see those stories, and that is a bleeding heart issue. And we don't want to be responsible for people's money if we're not looking after it properly. The regulations are designed to make sure that that's done well, and if we were to do that, you'd have to have a retail fund structure. And yes, that's down the track. Once we get to scale, I'd love to see everybody that wants to invest to be able to participate.
And where are you up to in terms of the construction pipeline and the projects and delivery and those sorts of things at the moment?
Well, we're growing. So we've been in this space for probably 2 years now, and we've got one project that's virtually just our first project getting its approval right now. We just got notification from the council, and it hasn't been easy. It's taken us a year to get something that's code accessible. In layman's terms, that means it's zoned for what you want to do. It's taken a year of going through council processes because of the politics behind it, we believe. They'll never admit to that, but I think they see that we're going to be a slum landlord and putting a big boarding house in their suburb, not thinking about what we're actually doing to solve a major problem, which is actually what our goal is. I think once we get past that, we'll be able to prove to people and councils that we're doing an amazing job, and we've got amazing places where people really want to live in. So now we've currently got about 300 rooms under contract or settled, or in the process of getting a DA and designed. Our goal is to have 500 rooms a year for 10 years. It's 5,000 rooms.
Yeah, wow. And in terms of your business itself, this is something that I guess other people can replicate as a model, and that could make a huge difference. Do you sort of think you will be making a pretty significant impact to social housing across Australia if you can deliver those sorts of volumes?
Absolutely, and that's our absolute goal. We also want to show other private companies that it can be done and it can be profitable. I believe that if we do a good job of this, and that's our intention, and everything we think about is how do we do a good job of this, we'll be able to show a pathway where you don't need to involve any government or institutions. Institutions in terms of large-scale investors, we definitely want to build. We're building products that are scalable and something that it's institutional grade, which means you can get, super funds and what have you invest. They've got benchmarks to meet. If we can meet those benchmarks and show them that we've got a great model, and it's unlimited, because there's an unlimited demand for this type of product. It's a great diversified space for any institution to invest in. So that's our task, is to prove that we've got a model that anyone can do, and we welcome anybody to be on the same pathway, because the country needs tens of thousands of these.
Yeah, that's the thing. I wanted to ask you, in your view, what is the current state of affairs when it comes to affordable accommodation? Because, you're solving a problem that the government has, right? Like right now we're having the round table over energy prices, but, housing affordability is a perennial subject. Traditionally, it's always been about, first home buyers not being able to get into the market. And that's something that, of course, we aspire to as Australians, as we think it's important for people to own their homes, as distinct from, say, other countries. But when it comes to rental affordability, that's not something that's discussed as much, but it has sort of come up on the agenda in the last little while because, rents have been flat for nearly a decade. And then suddenly we see this huge increase, which makes sense when you see the disincentivization for property investors with a million different things. I could go on for an hour talking about that. How would you describe the lay of the land when it comes to affordable housing and the interplay between your mum and dad investors owning an investment property, the build to rent emerging sector, the government stuff and the private stuff? Give us a bit of a tour of the locations.
Well, it's quite a complex question. There's so many things in there to discuss. I'll try and keep that down to simple terms. Look, the landscape has a variety of options, and I think that's important. There's no one simple answer. So when you look at the issue around affordable housing, land prices have skyrocketed, land supplies behind that, demographic changes is behind that. How people want to live and where they want to live is behind that. We can't say, hey, this council, this government just didn't do a good enough job. I mean, it's just such a complex puzzle. But in the end, I know that Australia and New Zealand the same has a tradition of government provided accommodation, and that's reduced dramatically. I can't quote the stats, but it's dramatically reduced. In the last few years, I did see some statistics in southeast Queensland where something like 60% of investors sold their properties to private people, which has created a massive supply issue for rentals. At the same time, 53,000 people apparently moved up here to Queensland, where we are at the moment. Last year, I will say we're looking at being nationwide, not just Queensland, but we're starting here because this is where our base is. And that's another major supply or constraint in terms of the supply. So pushing and pulling the market, supply and demand is constantly shifting and moving. So all I really think is that if you are able to go out there and do your bit, if you're the government, you do your bit. If you're a not-for-profit, you do your bit, and they all are. If you're a private enterprise and you think you can do your bit, do it. And I suppose, that's the goal. I mean, it's a community. We're a community. We're a country of good people that actually deep down, and this is something that goes right back to 360's philosophy. It's really important. The core is, I believe, every human has unlimited potential. Our job as a team is to help that human in our team and outside of our team unleash that power. I absolutely believe that that's where the real potential lies. It's not in rules, regulations, institutions. It's in individuals unleashing their absolute basic human potential, which is unlimited. And I think we can solve any problem.
Yeah, that's a pretty grand mission to be part of, and I can see why that energizes you so much. And if you think about your individual, that's, let's say, just an average person outside of 360. How can you reach your potential when you're subjected to that financial stress? That 50-60% of your expenses are going on living. You're more in a survival mindset. So there's something bigger than just providing housing, right? There's potentially efficiency gains across the country if we can solve this problem, right?
Absolutely. And look, and unleashing human potential actually gives the country a better outcome, because suddenly, like you said, and that is the major issue, if people don't feel safe, if they don't feel like they've got a roof over their heads, if they don't feel like they can feed their families, they are in fight or flight. And so many people live in that mode. So it's impossible to unleash your potential when you're surviving. And that's currently where a lot of people are at. So the more we can do as a community, as a team, as individuals, to help people move past that phase and into the phase where they feel safe and they feel secure and they've got a roof over their heads, they've got enough food on their table, then they're able to do more and provide more for others as well. So, I suppose being, philanthropic or doing things or thinking about the greater world can only really come if you're past that fight or flight mode.
Now you're talking about, hundreds of homes, or let's say doors, 500 doors a year for 10 years. That would make a huge difference, of course, but the problem is still way bigger than that. What's falling down now at the moment? You referenced the idea that the local councils with their development control plans and their DA assessments are worried about this slum landlord phenomenon. Is it just about proving that the private sector has a solution to this, and then the councils are sort of getting a little bit more confidence and we can get to a tipping point where the future is bright?
Yeah, I think, look, as I said, I don't like picking on anybody, but I reckon councils are a really big roadblock, actually, because you have people within them, the officers, they do the university degree, they end up being a town planner or whatever, and they're very prescriptive. Like we've got Gensler on the one in Loganholme, the big project we're doing there, and they've got 6,800 staff in 52 cities around the globe. And that council is telling them that the facade design's not good enough.
Right.
And they're showing us comparisons that look like the back door of a barn.
Right.
And we've got multitudes of variation in that design, greenery and all sorts of stuff. They're still telling us, and they're going to give us an approval telling us this, that it's not good enough and we need to put more time into that. I'm happy to put it as much time as it takes. But there's no real, I mean, I see it prescriptive. They could say, you do this, do this, do this, and that's prescriptive, right? They're not saying that, just that it doesn't look good enough. Well, how can you tell as a council, you know, somebody that's the largest firm in the world that has so much experience and they've done institutional grade buildings and, you know, everything from public sector to private sector, that they don't know what they're doing. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So we're up against that. And when I talk about education, you know, we sort of have to, I feel we sort of have to go into the council with the whole team, sit down and really explain it. And back in New Zealand, I did deals like that. I changed, you know, changed use of land and industrial into residential and had full council meetings. And we just about have to do that. I'm hoping to get a few good projects over the line and show them the quality that we're bringing and then build a reputation. And then I want to go to other councils and go, well, hey, Council A over here loved what we did. Look at the community change. Look at the benefit it gave everybody. So why wouldn't you want to do it? So I want to build that leverage, build that authority, and use that to go, wouldn't you want to be doing the same in your area? But, you know, in a way, you shouldn't. I don't feel you should have to do that. I feel like they should be saying, hey, affordable housing is a major issue in this country. What can we do to solve it? What developers can we get a hold of and drag them in here and show them what we are prepared to do? But no, it's like, we're prescriptive. Here's the rules. Do this, do this, do this. And then you've got some ethereal rule, which is like, it's nebulous. We need a certain design done. Okay, what does it need to look like? Oh, here's some examples. They barn doors. We're providing something a lot better. Can't you see that? It's frustrating. The most frustrating thing is that.
It would be amazing to get to the point where the people are sort of saying, you know, how do we get 360 into our LGA? How do we attract them in? You know, like, can we offer some sort of incentive to help fix our problems? But I guess you've got a bit of a long road ahead of you, but we wish you all the best. For people that are listening at home, you know, you talked about down the track there being the ability for mum and dad investors to get involved. But for people that are listening that do care about the affordable housing problem and the social issues that go with them, are there any ways that they can be involved?
Absolutely. I mean, that's how we are growing. You know, we have to have private money coming in, wholesale investors at the stage only, professional investors, and they're the people that we've got behind us. And that's a small community, and it's going to grow as our project pipeline grows. And basically just get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to provide you opportunities, which is what we're doing. I work with a commercial real estate project person who does a lot of advisory work in that space, and they're bringing a lot of commercial investors in, because this is actually a commercial space. It's a part of the commercial investment space. It's residential in flavour, but it has a risk profile of a residential project, which is good, but it has a commerciality of scale, which is what we need.
Yeah.
So just get a hold of us. We'd be happy to introduce you to opportunities.
Well, we'll be following your progress very excitedly through the Geared for Growth network and social media. In the meantime, Symon, we wish you all the best in that mission, and good on you for tackling something that is perhaps going to put a couple more grey hairs on your head. And we look forward to checking in with you in the future.
No, thanks very much, Mike. It's such a pleasure to join you. Thank you.
Thanks, Symon.